Ange Postecoglou must get his midfield selection right against Aston Villa to beat them on Sunday. Who is he going to pick in there? That is what we're going to discuss in this video. Welcome back to the Bowman YouTube channel. I hope you guys are doing well. In this video, we're going to preview the big game against Aston Villa on Sunday. Spurs have already had one big result this week against Man City. Can they get another? If you are new to the channel, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We preview every single Tottenham game and we break it down, as you can see on the channel here, thanks to all the love on the Manchester City review as well. So if you want to watch that, and hopefully we're going to be talking about a win against Aston Villa, that will be live on the channel on Monday. But for now, we are going to preview the game itself because Ange Postecoglou has got big selection dilemmas coming into this one. You can see here, I put question marks over those two midfield positions. Outside of that, that is the team that I believe he's going to pick. Son Heung-Min should be fit for the game. Christian Romero should be fit for the game despite coming off against Manchester City. And outside of that, I kind of think it picks itself to an extent. But those two midfield positions are going to be so big in this game. Will he go with Sarr? Will he go with Bentancur? Will he go with Bowman? James Maddison didn't play a single minute against Manchester City on Wednesday night. So for me, in terms of what I think Ange Postecoglou might do, he is a certainty to start. But do I think that is the right decision? Look, I'm not the man in the hot seat making the decision on Sunday. But you can question, is that the right way to go? There have been many questions about what is Spurs' best midfield. We've seen a lot of variation over the last few weeks with Madison and Kulusevski kind of playing as those two number 10s. Sarr and Bentancur played in there together with Kulusevski in the week, and that very much worked for Spurs. So does Ange Postecoglou go again with that? One of the big things that I want to talk about kind of coming into this game is the difference in kind of freshness in the two sides. If you look at the team that Aston Villa put out in the League Cup against Crystal Palace on Wednesday, lots of changes, as you can see. Diego Carlos, Tyrone Mings, Ian Maddison at the back, John McGinn, Boubacar Kamara just coming back from injury, Buendia, Leon Bailey. Leon Bailey is probably the only player, or the player out of this 11 that started the other night, that is most likely to start. Him or maybe John McGinn on that right-hand side. John Duran up top, obviously, we know is going to come off the bench and hopefully not score. But you look at the Tottenham team that we put out, again, very different opposition. We played Manchester City, they played Crystal Palace. Obviously, they went out, we went through. And we gambled with our first 11. We went big and we were brave and we were bold and we won the game as a result of that. But is this Spurs team with the Europa League as well starting to run on empty a little bit? That midfield battle is going to be so important, and you want, I think, the freshest legs possible in there. So it's going to be absolutely huge. We're going to talk about how Aston Villa will press us and how we can hurt their higher line. We're also going to talk about their defensive structure and how we could potentially break that down as well. What we've kind of learned from Aston Villa playing in Europe this season, how it's made them a little bit more streetwise. Thank you for sticking with me in this video, by the way. As you can probably tell in my voice, I've got a stinking cold, but I'm determined to get this video out and chat through it for you guys because this one is going to be an absolute belter on Sunday. It's an absolutely huge game. And one thing that you cannot get away from when talking about Aston Villa is, look, as a Spurs fan, we are going to be competing with Aston Villa over the next few years for that fourth spot. We saw that last season. We came fifth, they came fourth, and there was only 3 points in it by the end of the season. But there is so much to admire about Aston Villa. There's so much to admire about Unai Emery. And one of the things that he's got them, or one of the ways that he's made them this excellent side is their away form. You look this season, they've won 5 games, drawn 3, and lost 1. That only defeat was at home to Arsenal. But if you look at that away table, they've not lost a game yet. And the points that they did drop were away at Ipswich. Liam Delap caused them problems in that game with those direct runs. And Ipswich had a fair bit of success in that game. Other than that, they have won 3 on the bounce. They won at Fulham. They won at West Ham on the opening day. And they come to Spurs. Look, Ange Postecoglou, tactically, I think has got the better of Unai Emery in the 2 games that he's played against them. 1 win and 1 defeat. And that defeat is something that I want to talk about. As much as it pains me to go back to this game, I don't know how we lost this. I do not know how we lost this whatsoever. If you go back, let's kind of take a little bit of a trip down memory lane. It's a different Villa side to what we're going to see this season. Totally different midfield, and I think it'll be a different setup as well. We had 62% possession in that game. We created 2.34 XG, 4 big chances, 18 shots. Their keeper made 6 saves, Emi Martinez. We dominated the game. Absolutely dominated it. And if you remember rightly, Son Heung-Min had 3 goals disallowed in that game. And of course, Aston Villa's high line, as seen in this example, where Højbjerg sets Son Heung-Min in behind, that's where they are so disciplined. So disciplined. I think since November 2022, they've caught teams offside more than any other side in the Premier League, and it's by some distance as well. I don't have the updated metrics. There was a graphic that went around on Sky last year, which I haven't got for you. But trust me, it's over double the second place team that has caught their teams offside. they have a vulnerability and have a fragility, and if you keep going at them and keep trying to get in behind, you will get some joy. But more often than not, they are so disciplined. And if you think about how tight this offside decision was where Son Heung-Min raced through on goal, it was so tight. It's one of those things where sometimes it will go your way and sometimes it won't. And this is why, despite the fact that if you look at Aston Villa's side that day, I can get it up now, you can see how different it's going to be. Kamara and Douglas Luiz in there. Douglas Luiz isn't there anymore and Kamara's not going to play. It was John McGinn on the left-hand side. I don't think McGinn's going to play. I think it'd be Ramsey. Watkins played up front with Diaby, who's not here anymore. Matty Cash played at right midfield. And they kind of, if you look at the average positions, before Cash went off, they were almost kind of tucking into a back five a little bit with Digne and Cash kind of operating as wing-backs, Konsa, Carlos and Pau Torres kind of across a back three. They kind of build up in a bit of a similar way now, but with an extra body in midfield, or certainly an extra body in those kind of wide positions. And we can kind of see that here from their average positions against Fulham in their most recent Premier League away game where they did win 3-1. One of the ways that Fulham got a little bit of joy against them was going direct. That's how they got their goal. It was kind of one long ball over the top. Jimenez wins the battle against the centre-back, and he's in. And we know kind of Spurs' reluctancy to go direct. We haven't taken a long goal kick all season. However, I do think where we had to soak up pressure and really suffer against Manchester City, we did use Dominic Solanke as an outlet quite a lot, and it helped us to be very dangerous on transition. And that is another way that we can hurt Aston Villa in this game. But if you look at the average positions for Villa against Fulham in their last away game, you've got Leon Bailey there instead of Matty Cash. Matty Cash actually did play in this game, but I think it's more likely to be Ezri Konsa as that right back, because I think he helps them be more solid defensively. And again, I talked about Villa becoming a little bit more streetwise since playing in the Champions League. And one thing we can see from their defensive setup, which I'll come on to in a minute after I talk about who I think should go in here for Spurs, we'll kind of go through the options, is that they will kind of tuck into a back four, a very narrow back four, with their fullbacks tucking in centre back positions, and those wingers will often deploy as wing backs, kind of make it a bit of a back six. That's made them very streetwise. But as you can see here, it's very much a kind of a back three, and I think it'll be Konsa kind of tucking in possession with Carlos and Pau Torres there. And Villa will want to play out from the back as well, right? They will build up slow, but they like to play through the lines, just as we do, and kind of pick their moment. But you can see Luca Digne is the one holding the width on that left-hand side, allowing Jacob Ramsey to kind of come into these pockets, with Watkins kind of definitely as that focal point who will run the channels, but he's also got Morgan Rogers now to do that for him as well. And the direct running power that they've got with Watkins, Ramsey, Onana and Tielemans, Onana especially in that midfield as well. The ground you can see that these two cover is going to be a real problem for Spurs, especially if we are open as we obviously like to be. But of course we can hurt them. There is a massive upside to that as well. It's going to be a very, very interesting game. I did a preview show with Luke from Up the Villa. Go and check that out on his channel. Really enjoyed doing that. And I was watching their preview for this game as well. They did kind of a tactical breakdown on how they thought Aston Villa could hurt Spurs. And one of the areas that they identified is something that's been a weakness for Spurs, certainly in the last few games. I want to come and talk about this in a minute. But if we go to the goal that we conceded against Manchester City in the Carabao Cup in the week, if I just move myself up here, it's kind of been a goal that Spurs fans have been accustomed to conceding, or certainly not happy about, but it's something that we've become used to seeing in recent weeks against West Ham and against Manchester City. You've got Savinho, or in this case kind of Leon Bailey, driving at Destiny Udogie, and it's that free man at the back post. And when I come back to this Aston Villa side and what they potentially might line up with, you've got players like Jacob Ramsey, like Morgan Rogers, and obviously Ollie Watkins as well, but these two in particular, Rogers and Ramsey, who love making those off-the-ball runs, kind of untracked. And that is something, especially from that left-hand side, especially with Jacob Ramsey's willingness and desire to arrive late in the box, that is something that we've got to really be careful about on Sunday. But let's come to Tottenham then. Let's talk about the midfield, because I think there are kind of pros and cons to playing every single possible combination that you could play in this game, right? I think naturally when you think about Aston Villa and you think about the strength that they've got in midfield, and especially the legs and power of Onana, coupled with Tielemans on there, who kind of gives them that composure on the ball when teams do press. He's able to kind of get out of tight situations. It's a really nice balance in midfield that they've got. So naturally, I think your first instinct is to play Pape Matar Sarr in there for those legs, for that running power. I think we've done well to keep him quite fresh this season, and he came off at half-time on Wednesday. Ange Postecoglou said it was for nothing more than the fact that he'd already been booked in the game and he didn't want to risk him. I totally understand that. Obviously, big game at the weekend. City will be able to draw fouls, win free kicks. Basuma got booked basically as soon as he came on. There was a chance that Pape Matar Sarr could have got a second yellow in that game. But the running power that he's got and the way that this game might become quite transitional. Again, if I go back to the game last year, the fact that Villa are leaving this amount of space shows that they are prepared to kind of commit those bodies forward. And we can kind of see that in an example of how I think they might press us here. In this example, I've gone for Basuma and Madison because I do think that is the pairing that Ange Postecoglou will go with. Is it the pairing that I would go with? We'll come on and talk about that in a minute. But again, they're going to leave space. They're going to commit bodies. So someone like Pape Matar Sarr's running power in that game, where it's going to be a little bit more basketball, like a little bit more transitional, could be really important. So who'd you go in there with? Bentancur, I thought, partnered him really well in kind of more of a double pivot on Wednesday. And Kulusevski kind of played more as that number 10, almost as kind of a second striker at times. So is that what you do? Is that how you go with? I know a lot of Spurs fans on social media over the last few days have kind of definitely been calling for this. Bentancur gives you that composure in possession to kind of get out of these tight spaces. You can use Sarr as that outlet ball to really get you up the pitch. But the reason that I think he's going to go with James Maddison is exactly for kind of situations like this. Now, it'll be very interesting to see when Villa kind of go man for man in terms of their pressing. This is kind of a typical build-up pattern that we kind of see with Spurs a lot. The two centre-backs split. Vicario will often play it to Romero. And again, if you go back to Wednesday night, the goal that we scored against Manchester City, of course we got done playing out from the back a few times. But the goal that we scored, Vicario plays it out to Romero, into the full-back. Kulusevski makes that run off of Gundogan, which is something that I absolutely loved. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this now is that I think if they do kind of set up in this pressing structure, which I think they will, with the kind of the two men, they will be aggressive. I've actually got... They aren't the most aggressive pressing side, Villa, but they will come and press you. I've got some statistics here in terms of defensive height versus PPDA. PPDA is passes per defensive action. The less amount of passes per defensive action, the higher and more aggressive the press. You can see they're definitely in the top half in terms of aggressive press, and also in terms of the defensive height as well. They're kind of somewhere in the middle. So that kind of alludes to their recognition of game state a lot of the time. They will press high when they need to. They will sit back when they need to. And again, this is something that I wanted to talk about here. With Villa in terms of their defensive structure, kind of going into this back six with the wing backs kind of tucking in at times as well. And that's definitely something. Luke from Up the Villa again kind of spoke about the fact that there's almost two different Aston Villas, one that kind of play in Europe and one that play in the Premier League. And something that we've seen in Europe, especially when they came up against Bayern Munich, is this real desire to be compact defensively, where those fullbacks really may come narrow and the wing backs come and help defensively. Again, there might be changes of profiles in this. McGinn might come on at this point. They might go with Cash as kind of more of a wing back. But yeah, they have that ability to kind of adapt in game, and I think that's kind of borne out in the fact that they're kind of in the slap bang in the middle of these pressing and these defensive height metrics. And again, it's not exactly, their pressing isn't exactly leading to many turnovers for Villa. They kind of, as you can see here in kind of that top left section of that graph, they are high pressers, but they are kind of getting a low amount of turnovers, whereas you can see with Tottenham, I think our pressing is far more fruitful. And again, against the Villa side that is going to want to play out from the back, our pressing intensity is somewhere we can really hurt them. I do worry about that intensity a little bit in this game, given the fact that Dom Solanke played 90 minutes the other night. Dejan Kulusevski played 90 minutes the other night. Brennan Johnson again played most of the game, but you've got Son Heung-Min coming back fresh for this one. James Maddison didn't get on the pitch at all, and that is why I do think he'll go with Madison in this game. And I'll come back to it now for kind of, I'll come back to that shortly as to reasons why. Kind of jumping a little bit all over the place here, but there's so much to talk about, guys, honestly. Again, going back to Villa's pressing, it's kind of that risk-reward thing again with Spurs as well here. You can see the kind of build-up pattern. Kulusevski makes that movement off. And the reason that I wanted to highlight this with Kulusevski moving off Gundogan is that I think it's going to be very interesting to see which of these two pivot midfielders with Onana and Tielemans are the one that is responsible for tracking Kulusevski. And I think it's probably going to be Onana because of the running power, because of that kind of defensive discipline. It's going to be harder for Kulusevski to kind of make those movements off him compared to someone like Tielemans, who he's got that physical advantage over. And again, what is something Spurs will be looking to do is these kind of patterns. Romero out to Porro, little ball inside there, maybe into Kulusevski, or little ball kind of outside down the line into Johnson. Kulusevski's made his move, and then Spurs can exploit that high line exactly like we did against Manchester City, and we're away. We're so dangerous in transition. And again, I do think if Son's not fit, and if Werner got through Thursday okay, especially with that goal, Wednesday okay, and especially with that goal that he got, I think he might maybe be the one to go with on that left-hand side over the other options, of which, of course, are limited. But coming back to James Maddison and his kind of role in all this, James Alcott said something really brilliant on one of his videos where he was talking about Manchester United and how they might set up under Amorim, and you might be thinking why that's relevant here. He was talking about a quote from Andres Iniesta where he said, when games become really high tempo and kind of have that basketball game franticness about them, it's not necessarily about having players who are quick, are mobile, or who are dynamic. It's about having players who are quick decision makers. And when the game is going to become tight like this in areas where Villa are going to want to press high, you want players like James Maddison who are able to think quickly and turn out of situations quickly, use their body and play the ball quickly to those runners in behind. So I think James Maddison, whether he starts, which I think he will, and I think maybe he should, I think he's going to be really important in this game for that kind of speed of thought and that ability to get the ball out of his feet quickly, that ability to kind of shrug off someone like Youri Tielemans, get round him, and then turn, and then Spurs are away. Like I said with Aston Villa before, I do think Postecoglou's kind of had Emery's number a little bit, and we definitely shouldn't have lost this game, and we showed that we could exploit their high line and get in behind them time after time, although Villa kind of had the joy in terms of being able to catch us offside. One thing I was interested about this game as well, when you go back to it last year, and maybe the reason why some people would advocate for playing Sarr in there with Bentancur, or maybe let's switch in Basuma, who I do think Basuma will play. That is my gut feeling. My gut feeling is that he's going to go with this, with Madison. Like I said, I do think he's not going to change. I think he's going to go with Kulusevski and Madison. And like I said, I think there are pros and cons to both. Maybe if you're going to go with Sarr, I think Bentancur is maybe the better option as that balance, because I think Bentancur gives you maybe what you lose in James Maddison in kind of that speed of thought and that passing and that ability to get out of tight situations and set Spurs away. But if you're going to go with Basuma, I think Madison is probably the one. And again, we know that we've got Pape Matar Sarr to come off the bench. However, one thing I wanted to point out about the game last year is that because of the injuries that we've had, obviously James Maddison didn't play. Dane Kulusevski in this one played as that sole number 10 and was actually able to get a lot of joy in this game. This was a chance that he had in the first few minutes. Bentancur is kind of moving forward the ball. Kulusevski is able to move off of Kamara and Douglas Luiz into this sort of space. Son Heung-Min is able to feed the ball through to him. He's able to get round Torres and Carlos and hit the post. I think we all remember the amount of painful missed chances we missed in this game. But again, Villa really have the ability to hurt us and nullify some of our threats. But they are going to have to be at premium intensity to beat the Spurs side. And I do think that the fact that they rotated heavily in the week against Crystal Palace with one eye on this game, that might give them the physical edge. But again, it might be one of those ones with Tottenham being buoyed from Wednesday. Obviously, we've got that little bit of an extra rest. Obviously, it's a Sunday game. Is that confidence? Can we ride on that wave of confidence in the Man City game and go and play with that freedom and go and play with that confidence that we have had Villa's number since Postecoglou has come here? Again, 50-50 in terms of the results, but in terms of the performances, I think Ange Postecoglou has coached 2 victories against Villa and Emery, and it's just not quite come off for him. But like I said, I think if you're going to go with Bentancur, I think Sarr is the better option, because I think he gives you those legs against that really powerful midfield. If you're going to go with Basuma, because he gives you that physical edge, he gives you that also ability to get out of tight situations, be press-proof, win those duels against Onana, I think Madison is the way to go. Madison will play for me. I think he didn't play at all on Wednesday. I think he's going to keep him fresh. And I do think James Maddison's kind of speed of thought in this game, in these kind of situations where he's able to wriggle away and he's able to pop it in to Solanke. Oh, that's the wrong one. He's able to pop it into Solanke, and Solanke's able to kind of maybe find these kind of passes into Som. Again, I think Solanke's going to be so crucial in this game as well. When we kind of go back, when we kind of put Solanke, when we kind of talk about Villa's midfield, that physicality that we didn't necessarily have in that focal point last season, I think against Onana and against Tielemans and against Rodgers as well, who is someone who I'm absolutely in love with, is going to be really important. Someone to kind of hold men off, drag those centre-backs out as well in Torres and Carlos, maybe, who I think he's going to go with, get tight to them, spin them, and he's able to kind of maybe play these sort of balls for Johnson and Son to run onto. That's something that we've seen so much with Solanke. So I think he is a huge, huge player for us in this game. But like I said, I think Madison's decision-making and his speed of thought is maybe the reason that he might go with him when the game becomes a little bit more frenetic. and it becomes a little bit more tight in these kind of areas where there is a lot of congestion, a lot of bodies, his ability to kind of wriggle out and just find that little pass with the outside of his foot to set us away on transition. But like I said, Villa have got that flexibility where they are able to sustain pressure for long periods. Again, if I go back to the game against them last year, we had 62% possession. They were camped in for a long period. But again, that streetwise nature that they've got now from playing Champions League football on a consistent basis, they will make it difficult for us. And again, that is potentially another reason why you go with James Maddison, that ability to undo these low blocks. Of course, you have to be worried about what they might possess on the counter-attack. And again, no Van de Ven means that we haven't really got that security blanket of the recovery pace. Is there an argument, maybe, just kind of thinking of this off the top of my head, when you're thinking about Spurs and not wanting to be too vulnerable on transition? I think Destiny Doggies looks a bit leggy recently. He's had to play a hell of a lot of football. Is this the right sort of game for, hear me out, someone like Ben Davies? And it kind of allows you sometimes to sort of almost tuck in to a bit of a three here and then give Porro that freedom to be that extra man in midfield. Because again, when you think about Villa's high line, Porro kind of pinking up these certain areas, not necessarily building out from the back. I think Porro is better staying wider and able to combine in these kind of triangle, these kind of areas. Yeah, I think Porro kind of staying a little bit wider in these kind of instances is better. But I do think when we're kind of building up from the back, but I do think Porro here, with the high line that they've got in his passing range, his ability to come central and kind of find these balls in over the top could be big. So I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to play Destiny Udogie. But could it be one for something like that? You kind of create this nice little box in midfield and you get the width then from the wingers. I don't think Ange will do that, but I think it's food for thought, potentially. But, yeah. Let me know what you think, guys. I think this is a fascinating game, an absolutely fascinating game from a tactical perspective for what it means for Spurs this season as well. When you look at Villa, like I said, they are 5 points above us at the moment, and if we see them as our main contenders or main challengers for top four alongside Chelsea, we could either close the gap to 2 points. With a draw, we keep it at 5. With a loss at home, it goes to 8. And then if Chelsea beat Man United as well later that day, they will go 7 points above us. And then that top four position this early on in the season is looking really hard to kind of regain those points back. Of course, there's a lot of football to play, but this is such a big game and it's so important why Ange Postecoglou gets that midfield choice right. I think there's pros and cons to every single possible selection you could make. I think it's so hard to pick whether you go with Sarr and Bentancur, whether you go with Bissouma and Madison. I think I'm leaning towards Bissouma and Madison right now, just because Madison's speed of thought in the game. But I also think you can make a very strong argument for Bentancur and Sarr as well. And I think I might change my mind 10,000 times before the game on Sunday, right? But kind of, I think I've been a little bit influenced by what I think Ange is going to do. And I definitely think he's going to play James Maddison. But you guys, please let me know what you think in the comments. This is such a huge game for Spurs. And like I said, there will be a breakdown on the channel on Monday. Hopefully we are talking about a Spurs victory against Aston Villa, which would be such a big statement this early on in the season and such a brilliant way to cap off an excellent week, getting through in the cup against City, showing that we can go toe-to-toe and beat these beat strong opposition. Postecoglou's got the better of Emery on a number of occasions now, and hopefully he can get the result at home, unlike last year. A result which the performance deserved last year. Oh, sorry, a result in which, well, we should have got a result in which the performance deserved last year, but we didn't. This year, we're going to play that performance and we're going to get that result as well. Thank you for sticking with me in this one. I'm running on empty a little bit in terms of the fumes, right? I'm ill. I'm under the weather. I'm suffering. But hopefully Spurs aren't going to be suffering too much on Sunday and hopefully we'll beat Aston Villa. So if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like the video as well. And please let me know all your thoughts in the comments and give me your midfield and a score prediction as well. See you on Monday. Up the Spurs.